Oh, there they all are. Hello. Okay. Which, raise your hand. Well, if you're not on camera, don't raise your hand. But if you've met me in person, raise your hand. Okay. Amanda. All right, good. When did we meet, Amanda?
We met when I was in DC for the AAAS fellowship
All
summer
right.
before this one.
Right, right. Okay. Well, hello, everyone. Hey, guys. Yeah, so Burley said we're going to talk about leads and nut graphs, and um, it's really it's really hard for me to say how I come up with things because I never know until I come up with them. But I think one of the things that I do, which probably annoys everybody around me, and that's okay, is I mean, not at work because I don't dare annoy my colleagues. Well, I do that anyway. But I'm writing and thinking about writing and writing bits of things all the time. And so when I sit down at a computer to write, I've already written. I'm just typing when I sit down at the computer. So one of the things that's sort of always going through my head is how is something going to start, um, and um, and so uh, I'll try to give you my process. I'll try to give you some tools of things that you can use. My advice always, and you'll see why, because it speaks to my own how I got into this. But my advice is to look at other people, look at leads that you like, look to see what makes you think, oh, I wish written that, and then write something like that the next time. Now, obviously, it's going to vary by topic, by time, by publication. I mean, some things you can get away with, and some things you can't. But what is a lead? It's the start of a story to get you interested. But anyway, let me. Burley said to talk a little bit about how I got started. Oh, there's Monica adjusting her screen. I like this, watching everybody doing things. Anyway, I'm sitting in what they call a production room here. These are rooms they've got some sound insulation on the back, and the idea is that we all live in cubicles out in the main room there, and when we have to edit a story, we come in here so that we can speak without bothering everybody sitting around us. So it's a nice room to sit in to do this kind of thing. But yeah, just to go back, it's funny. I was just got an email today from one of my pals from that graduated with me in 1982 from the University of California, Santa Cruz. Um, I went to graduate school there. I was interested in human sleep physiology. I'd gotten interested in that in college. Um, I wasn't really, I mean, I liked sleep research, but the main reason I went into sleep research is I didn't get into medical school. I had to do something with myself, and my that's not a great reason to go to graduate school. I mean, it's an okay reason. Anything will do, but at some point, if you're not really passionate about it, or it's not really, it's what you really want to do, you get to the place where I got to, which was, oh my goodness, I'm going to graduate with a PhD, and then what am I going to do? And so I was at about 4 years in when I had actually collected all the data I needed for my dissertation, and I'm trying to think, okay, what's next? And an issue of Science magazine came across my desk in my basement office in Kerr Hall at Santa Cruz, and it had an ad for the AAAS Mass Media Fellows Program, and if you haven't heard about that and you're interested in mass communications, you should look it up, because it's a program where AAAS takes, well, I don't know, it's anywhere from a dozen to 2 dozen, mostly science grad students, although some people have already started their postdoc and some haven't even gotten into grad school yet, and plops them down into a news site. And so I wrote an application and I showed it to someone, and she said, "This is terrible." And what she meant was, it sounded boring, like something I would write for, um, a science article, I mean, a journal article. And so she said, look, you're a funny guy and you're an interesting guy. Make the people who select this know that. And so I rewrote it, and who knows if that's what made the difference, but it made a difference. I got the fellowship, and I really liked it because I went to the local CBS station. At the time, it was WDVM. Today it's WUSA, but it's the CBS affiliate. And there was a science writer there named Steve Gindel, and Steve was a terrific science writer for local television news. But I remember going out with him, and he would tell these stories. We'd go out and he would do interviews and everything was fine. He'd come back and he'd put a story together. And I just remember sitting there and sputtering like, oh my God, you left this out, you left that out, you left this other thing out, you left all these things out. How could you do that? And then I realized, he had 2.5 minutes and he had to do it. It was a really great, more than anything else I think I could have done, it was a great way to sort of see the opposite extreme of writing a journal article and really understanding, because every time at the end of the day, I would ask myself, okay, did he distort the story beyond all recognition? And the answer was no, he left stuff out. And that's what you have to do. And people yell at me and, so how can, you've left so much out? And I go, well, look, if I could synthesize your entire scientific career and put it into a piece that runs 2.5 minutes, you haven't accomplished very much in your life. So I think you got to understand that all these scientists like to be on NPR, but of course I'm going to leave things out. It has to be. So so I did that, and I came back to Santa Cruz, and I thought to myself, okay, Joe finally knows what he wants to do with himself, and it was to be a journalist. No training, right? So I figured I wanted to get into television because it had the least amount of writing. And so but I had to learn how to write. And so what I would do is I tape record the nightly news in San Francisco where I was living, and then transcribe it and just look at it and say, okay, here's how they start things. And here's what the format is, and here's how long a typical piece is, but I'd see it in writing. So I did that, and I won't bore you, but I did a bunch of different things, and then wound up after 3 years as the health and science producer for the same station where I was an intern. And it was okay, but local television news is about as far to one end of the journalism scale as you can go. And I guess writing for science and nature are the other end of the journalism scale, at least in terms of science. And then one day I was sitting at my desk and the editor of Nature called me up and said, how would you like to come and work for us? And that's like, okay, well, that's a great thing. How do you get that to happen? And I have to tell you, there's no rhyme or reason, except for I was a loyal participant in the AAAS mass media program in terms of going to fundraisers and being a judge. And I was always trying to help out because I felt it was such a valuable program to change my life. Anyway, I got picked up by Nature I started January 2nd, 1986. And the very first thing I did was go to a meeting on viral associated cancers and sat next to Robert Gallo for 6 hours on 3 different flights that took us to Martinique in the Caribbean. Does everybody know who Robert Gallo is? Naming a bell? That's so funny. Anyway, Robert Gallo in the 80s was the discoverer of the AIDS virus. Of course, subsequently, Luc Montagnier was given that credit and won the Nobel Prize for doing it. And Gallo's contributions were not insignificant, but he didn't discover the AIDS virus, and this was a great blow to him. Anyway, he happened to stumble on it because it was a contaminant from the virus that the French sent him. He would have discovered the AIDS virus. He was close, but he didn't get it, I don't think. Anyway, I worked for Nature for 3.5 years, and then I was traded to Science for a future draft pick, and I worked for them for 3.5 years. And then I had artistic differences with the editor at Science, and I took and NPR had an opening for a 1-year sabbatical replacement, which was a pay cut and a temporary job. And I said, okay, that sounds great. And I did that. And that's already 27 years ago. So That's the whole story. 27 years in the same dead-end job. So let's go on to writing a lead. It's the first thing, I mean, apart from the headline, which I think is equally important and difficult to come up with a good, sexy, appealing headline, it's the first line, right? It's the first thing that people are going to see. It has to capture the story. It doesn't have to capture the whole story. It has to capture some element of the story. For me, I like wordplay. So if it's got something clever in the words or the usage of the word, somebody was telling me, I wish I could remember, I don't know, moonlight falls on a sunless sea or something like that. You know, if you can put some words together that seem a little unusual, that's good. If you can describe a scene, anecdotal leads are very good. You know, I'm gonna show you a couple of leads that actually the SciCommers, although I think these are all when we were known as Fajobis, but the SciCommers wrote. That I thought really nailed it, because I mean there are magnificent leads, and oh, by the way, I didn't provide a link to this, but if you just Google Open Notebook and leads, LEDE, you'll find a really great article that was written about that. And similarly, when we get to nutgraphs, there's an Open Notebook article on nutgraphs, which is very good. There's also an Open Notebook on pitching, which is very good. There's a lot of good stuff. I mean, I would hang out at Open Notebook if I was getting started today. They even interviewed me, which I guess is their one oversight. But so I pulled up a couple of examples here, and we're gonna try this. Here we go. Okay, so presumably, Burley, can you still see this? No, I'm not hearing anybody. Does anybody have anything to say?
Yeah, it says, I don't see your screen. It just says JP has started sharing or screen sharing. Do you have the PowerPoint up?
Yeah, but I'm not seeing it. It has the Zoom meeting up right now.
There should be another box that lets you
I
pick.
got it.
Yeah.
How about now?
Yep.
Okay. So light perception underground. I don't know who wrote the headline. That's terrible. Sorry. I don't know what light perception underground means. But the first part of this story really cracked me up. Plants are divided into two parts, the shoots that gather light for photosynthesis and the roots that forage water, nitrogen, and other nutrients. These are their stories. Now, that only works for a certain set of the audience, but it worked for me because I heard thump thump, which is the theme from Law and Order. He just copied that brilliantly. So I know what the story's about, and I know it's going to be anecdotes about the difference between the shoots that go up and the roots that go down. I just thought that was fantastic. Here's another one I liked a lot. Climate is changing and so are salmon. Well, that's okay. But I like the lead even better. River temperatures in the Pacific Northwest are rising and salmon aren't doing so hot. That's great. That's just fantastic. I guess I get, oh, here's one I want to embarrass Burley. The amount of waste that I have seen generated in a scientific laboratory would make Al Gore cry. I mean, these to me are memorable, and I use them when I'm trying to tell people what you're after. And this one, I have to say, was my all-time favorite. Although, well, anyway, I'll read it in case you have trouble reading it. Standing at the shore of a cold and remote lake in the Canadian Arctic, I suddenly wished I'd spent more than $60 on the inflatable rafts I had ordered from Amazon. I bought them for their compactness, contemplating flying north with 10 checked bags with research equipment, but set against this stark and expansive landscape, they looked tiny and precarious. I thought, oh my God, I'm so in the story at this point. I don't know what she's going to tell me about after that. I mean, in a way, it doesn't matter, because the whole scene is set, and the idea of, I don't know if any of you have ever experienced this, of just standing someplace but to me, this absolutely works because it so to me, it so draws you in, because the scene is set. You know that she's a researcher up doing research in the Arctic lakes, and you know that she's like a normal human being who suddenly, was thinking, oh, I got a good deal here, and then suddenly she's in the middle of the Arctic and thinking, maybe I should have spent a little more. I think that's brilliant. This is one of mine that I was particularly liking, because I like to amuse myself, and it's a little hard to write a lead about an eclipse because everything's been written. But I was amused by this one. Billions of fish in the Pacific Ocean will be treated to an awe-inspiring celestial event today. That's because the total solar eclipse will be visible over a huge swath of the southern Pacific, or a total. So, and then land animals, like including humans in Chile and Argentina, will also get to observe the total spectacle, as will anybody connected to the internet and most parts of. But I like billions of fish. I think that one amused myself. And here I just thought I would share with you a funny thing that happened to me recently in terms of writing a lead, where I didn't actually get, I got into a fight actually. So I was doing a story about locusts, and I had gone to Arizona State University, so they have a locust lab, and I was amused by one of the guys in the lab because he was telling me what they fed the locusts, and I thought, oh, what do they do? Do you have some kind of locust chow? And he said, well, yeah, actually we do make a locust chow, but mostly what they eat is grass, wheatgrass. I thought, all right, well, okay. But I didn't want to make a big deal about that because that wasn't really their research, but I didn't want to leave this beautiful, ironic, silly kind of tape about what you feed locusts. And I couldn't think of a good way into it until I came up with this. So, well, anyway, here at NPR, we've been trying to do more stories that answer people's questions about issues they face in their daily lives. NPR's Joe Palca apparently didn't get the memo because didn't get the memo. I should have said that memo. Didn't get that memo because he's got a story with the answer to a question almost nobody has: what to feed a colony of captive locusts. Now, the funny thing, the anecdote to tell you that goes along with that lead is I wrote it, and then I woke up that morning and heard the story come on, and it didn't have that lead. And the lead it did have is, was what was just behind there. Come on, you can do it. There we go. At Arizona State University, they're raising locusts in a laboratory, thousands and thousands of them. It's part of a study on reducing crop damage. NPR's Joe Palca went to report on that study and immediately was struck by a question: what do you feed a swarm of laboratory locusts? To answer that question, it helps to go to Tempe, Arizona. I just found that too wordy and what have you, but it shows that you can't win all the time. Now, this is also something that I wrote, and it's example of an anecdotal lead, and it's this article I'm writing for National Geographic that hasn't come out yet, and it's about annoying and what the science of what's annoying. And I wrote a book a few years ago called The Science of What's Annoying with Flora Lichtman, and this was the lead actually that was more or less crafted by my editor, so I'm happy to steal it and give her credit. But picture yourself at a crowded airport departure gate. Your flight is 20 minutes late, although the illuminated sign still says on time. The woman on your left is noisily eating foul-smelling sushi. The overhead TV is tuned to a celebrity gossip show, a relentless stream of Bieber after Gwyneth after Miley, plus countless Kardashians. Countless Kardashians was me, I like alliteration. The man to your right is still braying into his cell phone, and the traveler next to him is preparing to kill time with, wait, is that a toenail clipper? Anyway, talking about setting a scene, I thought she did a fantastic job, or between us, we did a fantastic job of sort of saying, okay, you're in an amazingly difficult place. The other thing I would say is in terms of, and we haven't gotten to nutgraphs really yet, and I don't have as much to say about nutgraphs, but the nutgraph is supposed to sort of tell you, okay, here's what I'm about to do a story about. And this next paragraph is more or less the nutgraph for this story, which is, unless you're saintly or unconscious, a few things in that description, or many things, or all the things, are likely to really bug you. we know an annoyance when we experience it, but from a scientific perspective, just what makes something annoying? Are some things universally annoying while others are specific to an individual? And does research offer any advice for preventing life's annoyances from making our heads explode? And then I go on to say, we don't know. The answers to those three questions are we don't know, and no. But the nut graph in this case is here. It doesn't tell you any details about what's in the article, but it tells you what's about to come. And these tend to be useful, if nothing else, for helping you think about what you're going to be writing about. But editors seem to like them because they sort of presage what the article's about and help people get their heads into what you're going to be saying. You know, I don't know. I guess I write them. I happen to have written one in this case, but there you go. And the other thing, because you guys are a captive audience, is I have to show you the ending to this article because I am so insanely proud of it that and it hasn't come out yet, so you're way ahead of everyone. But in the decades since this book came out, I've thought a lot about what makes people, things, and situations annoying and what any of us might do to inoculate ourselves against becoming annoyed. The answer is actually surprisingly simple. All you have to do is, and then editor's note, the contract for this article set a strict word limit. The writer exceeded the limit. The magazine feels obliged to enforce it. We regret any annoyance this might cause to your readers. I mean, come on. And this is from today. I only put it up again because I thought it had a good example of a nut graph. This is the story that went on the air this morning. Tiny satellites are taking on a big time role in space exploration. That's a sort of a standard fact-based lead. It's not particularly brilliant, but it kind of gets you. I'm trying to contrast tiny and big time as the catch on the lead. And CubeSats are small, only about the size of a Rubik's Cube, twice the size of a Rubik's Cube, as the name suggests. They're cube-shaped, 4 inches on a side, weighing in about 3 pounds. But with the miniaturization of electronics, it's become possible to pack a sophisticated mission into a tiny package. So the next graph is really, well, I don't know. We've sort of, you know where we're going now because I'm telling you this is what the story's about. Do I have any more examples? No, I don't. Okay, so stop sharing. I've talked for like a half an hour or 25 minutes because we got a little bit of a late start. So why don't I throw it up open for questions? I can see people have. Should I look at those early or should we go to sound?
I don't think those are questions yet. Can everyone see the chat box? I know a couple of people have found it. You can either put questions there, or there's a way that you can like raise your hand if you want to just ask it, and both are totally fine. So if somebody, looks like Graham, maybe you have a question? You're unmuted.
Yeah, I don't see where the hand waving is necessarily.
I'll do it again.
I've seen it, but I don't see it right now.
If you don't mind, I'll just ask a question then, since I'm here. I'm curious if you use any kind of note-taking or management software. I know some people use things like Evernote and some other programs. Now that I'm writing my own article series, I haven't really figured out how to best organize all my different notes. And I've noted now, like when I'm like walking along with my dogs, like I'll have something pop in my head and I'll write it down in my little journal, but I now have so many different notes of these different things I want to write, and I'm not sure how to best organize them. And so I'm curious if you can just give us a little bit of a taste of what you do to organize your notes, to develop your articles, and then get these ideas for your leads.
Oh, scary. Bad news on that one. I don't do anything. I don't do anything. I curse myself for forgetting things that I thought would work and that were pretty good. No, I absolutely, so one of the things is, for the last 27 years, I've been working in an environment where there's a deadline and there's a fixed length. And so I'm not usually working on more than 1 or 2 stories at a time. And so I don't have, even when I was writing a book, if you read this book, it's more like a series of single stories lined up together. I think that's partly why the book wasn't very good. brilliantly written by Flora Lickerman and me, but I don't think it wasn't memorable in any way because it was just a series of interesting things you could read about. But I don't have so much up in the air that I can't keep it all together. And mostly, I also have very much come to rely on sitting at my desk and putting stuff together. Someone said to me a long time ago, a piece of advice that I thought was really good, and that is write the first line first. Because a lot of people, they say, well, okay, I know I want to say this, I know I want to say that, and I know I want to say this other thing, but I'll figure out how to start when I get around to it. And I sometimes write a sentence if I have something I'm particularly fond of, and I'll put it on the screen, but more often than not, I will write the lead before I actually write the story. But, and there's one caveat to that, and this is only because I work in audio, so every story, just about every story I've written in the last 27 years was intended first to be on the radio and then subsequently turned into a print piece or a web piece. So my process is radio and then print, and I'm sure there's other people that do it differently. But the way it's evolved in terms of radio, and I think it would probably be something similar in print at this point, is I tape everything, my interviews, because there's no point in having something if it's not on tape, it doesn't exist for radio. So I listen to my interviews and my sound and what have you, and then I pull the best tape. I pull the tape that I think is going to be interesting or compelling or something. And a lot of times, the tape that I wind up using isn't the one where, and this is where everybody gets twisted up, they try to explain CRISPR, or they try to explain, adaptive optics, or they try, and it's some really complicated science that I'm probably not even going to get into that much. So what I wind up doing is when I'm listening, if they happen to give an explanation that absolutely nails it, fine, great, write it, pull it out, write it, or put it into the clipboard. But because I know that doesn't happen all the time, I'm also listening a lot for transitional things like, and then we didn't know what to do. Well, nobody's going to put that quote in a headline, unless they write it really cleverly. But as a transition, as a way of getting from one place in a story to another place in a story, with me doing the description of the science and the scientists only helping me get it through the narrative, I'm listening for those kinds of pieces of tape too. So what I'll do is I'll record all kinds of stuff. I'll pull the stuff that I like. I'll just pull all sorts of stuff, put clips on a clipboard. It's just the same idea. And then I listen through to them all the way through, and I start to think, okay, if I start here, what do I go from? And if I go from here to there, and this piece that aired this morning is a perfect example of that, because the last person in the piece was the first person I interviewed. But I realized that when I got around to structuring the piece, I didn't want to start with her, even though she was what kicked the whole thing off. And I really like starting with the lady I started with, because she was talking about how she got started. So it's all linear in terms of chronology. And I try to go from one place to another, but I don't write any of it down. And as I said, the lead wasn't a blow your socks off lead, but it kind of gets you there. And it wasn't the first one I wrote. My editor said, I don't like the first one you wrote. So I said, okay. And what I do when they say that is I walk away and I think, okay, what am I trying to say in this story? And how do I say it in an affirmative way, and how can I do it differently than I've done it? I mean, the one I wrote was okay too, I think, but whatever. So that's my answer to that question. Thanks, Grant.
I have not found the raise hand button. Has anyone? Found it last time. Okay, if you want to ask a question on video, you can just unmute yourself, or if you want to throw it in the chat that you want to ask a question, I can call on people. Or you can just.
Actually, I just found the button. If you click on the thing that says participants, folks, you'll see where it says mute me, and it says raise hand beside that is how you can raise your hands.
That makes
Oh, I know that. And
I see
next to
that.
that on me, it says share. So that must be if you're not the leader or something.
Yeah, because I can't see that. Okay.
Okay,
Is
cool.
anybody raising their hand? What kind of stories draw you in the most? From E.A. Zale.
Is that
that's
a,
me. Hi.
where are we? What kind of stories draw you in the most? Okay. Hi. Uh, uh, the most. Well, I guess I have to say in the end, it's the ones with interesting people, or people who have something interesting to say or who are fun to talk to. Uh, and also stories that are like, and then, you know, and then what happened? Holy smokes. And I just did a story last week, and it was actually a follow-up on a story I did 5 years ago, which was one of the most amazing stories that I ever heard, about a guy who was a chemist at Harvard, doing a postdoc at Harvard, and his son was diagnosed with retinoblastoma, which is a hideous eye cancer where you grow tumors on the back of, you know, on your retina, on the back of the eyeball. And he wound up losing an eye and having all kinds of radiation and stuff like that. And he actually was a total, so before his son was diagnosed, his wife came to him and said, you know, I've been taking all these pictures of our son, Noah, and some of them have this funny white reflection. And I was reading in a parent magazine that this white reflection could mean that there's not blood vessels at the back of the eye, but there's a tumor covering the blood vessels. And like the asshole that he was, he grabbed the camera from her and said, you don't know what you're doing. And he took a bunch of pictures where he didn't get the white eye, which is not surprising because of the way the tumors are. Depending on the angle that you're shooting the picture into the eyeball, you might hit it or you might not. And he just told her she didn't know what she was talking about. And then a month later, the doctor says, oh yes, there's that white reflection. I'm afraid your kid has retinoblastoma. And he was, I mean, of course, chastened, and they were both crushed. But then after about a year and a half or 2 years of chemotherapy and radiation and beam therapy and all kinds of other horrible nastiness, and getting a fake eye, which the kid used to pop out and drop on the floor, and he said it sounded like M&Ms falling on the floor. He's a very funny boy. I met him 5 years ago. Anyway, he had this idea. He said, wow, I mean, if we saw that white reflection when he was 3 months old, which was when they first saw it in the pictures, I wonder if you could use some software to see if it was there earlier. So he digitized all the pictures that his wife had taken, thousands of pictures, by date, and he found the first example of white eye at 12 days. And he thought, well, if people could have some kind of software that would tell them that this was there, then maybe they would catch the disease earlier, and the tumors wouldn't be so big, and maybe they wouldn't have to remove the eyeball. Well, I've just told you the basics of the story, and now he does have the software, and and he had a paper in Science Advances last week or 2 weeks ago, something like that, 3 weeks ago, I don't know. That story just had so many interesting elements of it, and I just thought, well, it drew me in because it was, I mean, it just was remarkable that he would have thought of this, and that he was in a position to do it. I guess he's a chemist, you know, he had to collaborate with people, but he was thinking like a scientist, and I really liked that idea. So that drew me in. Yeah, I don't know, the other part of it, which blew me away, and I don't know, maybe you guys will be blown away, or maybe you'll just go, well, that's nothing, is he's a born-again Christian. And I'm just so unused to that in scientists that I got him to explain that in the piece too. And so, and he carries a concealed weapon in the glove compartment of his car because he lives in Waco, Texas now. And I just don't know that many scientists who pack a Glock and, you know, go to church and do research, and have 3 kids now, one with retinoblastoma, and then 2 that they had with pre-implantation genetic diagnosis because they wanted to select embryos that wouldn't have the mutation. It's a recessive mutation, and he happened to get 2 copies, and neither of them knew they were carriers. Anyway, wow, a lot going on there. So I really like that one. But
I think that's a good point too, Joe, that people are saying in the comments that they thought that was a great story and they were hanging on to your words. If you find yourself telling someone about the story you're thinking about writing and they don't walk away,
yeah.
It's a good sign. Say it out loud to someone else. And if they go, so what, it might not be a fully captivating story that you should pursue.
No,
right?
I could see by people's looks, you know, when they start nodding at you. That's why I like giving public talks. I tell stories because I can tell people are getting into it. And yeah, I do. I mean, when I'm starting on something, I grab people and say, you got to hear this. And if I have a little clip of tape, I mean, I just did this interview. Again, it depends on the person and how articulate they are. But I interviewed this woman from 3M Corporation who has like more than 100 patents. And you talk to her and she sounds, I mean, I've got this Midwest, my in-laws live in the Midwest. And so I'm used to hearing this Midwest kind of accent. And it felt so much like I was talking to somebody who was about to go to the church social with a covered dish. Only she's like this hot stuff inventor. And she told me all these stories and she did it with such flair. And I'm going, oh my God, I just want to turn the microphone on and let you talk. Anyway, again, that's one of the reasons, by the way, peoples, that I like radio as opposed to print, because you can hear me sound interested. And it is really nice to be able to sound interested in what you're talking about. It's not a dimension you can get so much in print. And you can't even do it so much in television because the pictures are distracting. But if you have it in radio, and I tell you every time, and I think this is the way you should think about your stories too, and even if they're not for radio. My attitude is that everything I'm going to write or tell you about is going to be the most interesting thing you're going to hear that day. And you may never have heard about what I'm going to tell you about, and you never thought you'd be interested, but by the end of reading this article, this is going to be the most interesting thing you've read in the last 24 hours or heard in the last 24 hours. And I really believe that bringing that attitude helps you a lot. And you have to keep asking yourself, again, this is getting into other things besides leads and nutgrafs, but you have to keep asking yourself, what's essential and what can I leave out? And you better leave out all the things that fall under the I can leave this out category, because otherwise you spend all your time trying to explain stuff and you're not, I mean, it's like, I was talking about a drug that is a very effective painkiller, but it has to be injected into the spinal fluid. And I said it has to be injected into the spinal cord, and somebody wrote and said, no, it's actually the subarachnoid nucleus of the spine, the subarachnoid area. And I thought to myself, look, I'm hoping nobody goes out with it, you know, tries to inject somebody with this stuff based on a 3-minute radio piece. So, you know, let's be real here. You know, I just couldn't, subarachnoid space. Anyway, whatever, I'm babbling.
We've got about 15 minutes and 3 or 4 questions have popped up. So I can read them in maybe like 4 or 5 minutes each.
Okay.
Let's see. It seems like you still pitch a lot of ideas or ways of writing, and your editors can still ask you to change things. What role does that kind of regularly redoing of writing play in your process? Is it really common?
That editors ask me to change things? Oh, yeah. And some stories are clearer than others. I mean, sometimes I think, I got it, I nailed it, I know we go from A to B to C, and you know, there's nothing, you know. And sometimes I'm thinking, this isn't really flowing right, and I need help. But in terms of pitching, I don't have too much trouble with that. If I get interested in it, I mean, unless it involves, you know, expensive travel, I'm not too worried about getting to do it. Yeah, I'm not. I mean, if I think it's interesting, I have at least, I think, a bit of a reputation for the ability to make other people think it's interesting. So, you know, I mean, I still bring that same enthusiastic. I guess it's a little bit of selling to the editors, just like you sell to the public. But anyway, that's the answer there, a short answer. Do you want me to look at the next one from?
Did you ever take formal journalism courses to help you writing? Do you follow a journalistic guide, or do you just write how you feel it sounds best?
Never took a journalistic course. We had a fascinating discussion, a 2-hour mandatory session on legal issues in journalism. And that's the kind of thing you would get in journalist schools, I mean, in journalism schools, you know, about what you can and can't be sued for and how various laws can get you in trouble. Even if your reporting is accurate, you can still wind up in jail. But no, as I said, what I did was I copied the form that I was trying to emulate, and I encourage everybody to do that. You have to find the form, the style, the something in the domain that you're working in that you find appealing and try to write to that. I don't feel, I mean, oh my goodness, my son is now a journalism major at University of Minnesota, so I'm hoping he'll tell me what I missed, but I didn't take anything. You're muted now, Kimberly, or Burley, so.
There's a really great resource on the Open Notebook called Storygram, where they basically go through someone's reported piece and kind of pick it apart and say what they were doing and why it works. And here's the link to that. I believe it's Storygram. Don't
mess with chemists. Yeah, totally. I'm always up for not messing with chemists. And I saw Chani has a question, which I'd like to answer. What do you see as the main point of science communication? To entertain, tell human stories, or to convey information to prompt further investigation? Well, I have to say I've sort of changed in my career. I had a much more noble purpose, noble in the sense that, yeah, I thought I'm going to explain stuff to them and people are going to understand it and use it to make good decisions. And I'm now convinced that people only use a fraction of what they hear as facts to make decisions, because I just don't, I mean, there's so many silly things that are being decided the wrong way against the facts nowadays that somebody's not listening. So I've kind of bailed on the idea that I can explain stuff clearly enough for everybody to get it and change their behavior or change their attitude. So I do things, I'm more into the process of science and how interesting it is. And I'm a little discouraged. But if you think about it, I mean, and again, I won't belabor this point, but there's nobody in America that doesn't know that smoking is bad for you. And there's still people who smoke. So there was a long time when the media was we were trying to get the message out that smoking is bad for you. Smoking is bad for you, that message is out, you know? And it still didn't stop everybody from smoking. Climate change is real. The media has covered it. It's been spoken about enough for everybody to understand that it's real. It's not entirely clear what you do about it, but it's definitely real. And people are going, well, yeah, okay, but we can postpone doing anything about it. Well, that's sort of par for the course for human behavior. So I don't think it's a question of conveying information or prompting further investigation. There's a few of you, mostly scientists, who say, I heard your story and I wanted to learn more, so I followed all this stuff. That's not the common comment I get.
I think we missed one a little higher up. Have you ever found that stories where the protagonist isn't actually a person to be successful, instead of a theory, concept, or a theory, concept, or technology as the protagonist?
Well, Yes, I mean, it is astounding to me, astounding, that I asked the digital people here to tell me what story I did this year had the most page views. And the answer was a story about the electric dipole moment of the neutron. And there's no way that that could possibly have been the most popular story, but somehow or other it was. And I'll just show you why I think eloquent. I'm just looking up yeah, so I'll share the screen again when I get this up here. Hang on, I'm just getting it now. Okay, so I'm going back here, and now I'm sharing the screen, and I'm sharing this screen. And that was the picture and headline we used, and I thought, well, that's probably why, because it was, it just cracks me up. But that page had 180,000 views in the last month, in the last year, something like that. So go figure.
All right, I think one more. Writing about public health and climate change often means communicating bad news or sad stories. In your work, do you consider whether a story will be sad or harrowing or happy or hopeful? Do you find yourself drawn to stories with a particular emotional bend, or avoid some?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely, I mean, stories with an emotional content are usually more memorable. You know, when I profiled the engineer who was in charge of the landing system for the Mars Curiosity rover, I wanted people to understand his anxiety about how much was riding on him getting this crazy ass landing system to work. They called it, you know, the 7 minutes of terror and all this, but I was trying to make him into a human being because I didn't think, you know, it's easy to talk about the technology, but there's always a person behind it. So I like the way that story came out a lot, even, you know, and it turned out that this engineer is, you know, he loves it. He's sort of the Elvis Presley of engineers. So he made it easy to tell the story. But yeah, I'm drawn to stories with some kind of happy ending. Again, I am sad to say that two of my most powerful stories involve childhood cancers because, I mean, forgive me, childhood cancer stories are like shooting fish in a barrel for emotion. I mean, you know, anybody's going to be torn apart by some cute little kid dying of some hideous disease. So what can I say? I mean, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
All right, if there aren't any more questions, Joe, do you have any last thoughts about leads and nutgraphs and maybe where people can go to learn more, to get better? I mean, we mentioned the open notebook is a really good.
Yeah. Well, you know, again, you talked about keeping notes. I would seriously, somewhere, if you Google around on the internet, somebody's made a collection of the best leads. I think Poynter Institute actually is a good journalism site, Poynter, and they had a collection of the best leads. The famous one is, what was it? Headless body found in topless bar. I mean, that was a headline, but but look around for the things, especially in science articles, that work for you, and ask yourself, why does that work? And if you can answer that question, then you can begin to formulate your own ideas about how what you are trying to do will be interesting. But just remember, nobody's intrinsically, except for other physicists, nobody's intrinsically interesting about the electric dipole moment of the neutron. So you're going to have to think of something to drag people in. And if you go back and listen to that story, you'll see I came up with in fact, I only did the story so that I could do the lead. And if that intrigues you enough to go see what that was about, go see what that's about. Can you repeat the website? Oh, so you posted it, right? Yeah, she's nodding. Thanks, Graham. Looks like, okay. You're welcome, everybody. You guys are very, what do I want to say? You guys mean a lot to me. I'm very happy about this project, and I'm happy to be regarded as helpful and useful to you. So, you know, keep up the good work, fight the good fight. I think it is important that people talk about science in a positive way, and I think you can't wait for the next world of journalism or journalists to do it, because the world of journalism is just changing so much. I mean, I'm thinking that people need to have a day job when they're doing journalism now, because the number of full-time jobs in journalism are scarce. And I don't want to scare anybody who wants to do it. There's still jobs. But I really feel that if scientists can become more integrated in the notion of communicating, whether it's to their friends or to their immediate circle or whatever, then I think that's going to be better for everyone, I hope.
Awesome. Thanks, Joe. Thanks everyone for coming.
Oh, my friend wants to say goodbye. Bye.
And everybody, let's see, everybody that's here still, I'll just let you know the next mentor chat is in actually a couple weeks, and we did get Erica Hayden to come talk to us. So look out for that email later today. That'll be in a couple weeks, pretty soon. But
bye, everyone. I'm out of here. I have an interview to do in 15 minutes.
Thanks for coming, everybody. Bye.